So we should treat those people like combatants and we should kill them. And I use that language. I use that language very specifically. Internet of Things should scare the hell out of you. Not my freaking problem. That's a you problem. North Korea fires a nuclear weapon at Washington, D.C., and we decide to respond by breast milk?
Yeah.
We have a strategic reserve of cheese in a cave of Missouri. When you're Russian, you can put out disinformation saying, look, Ukraine is harvesting organs from dead soldiers. One of my favorite things to do is, I don't know if I'm a psychopath, but, I find people. And he sees me and goes, hey, McBeth, what's up? We're here together.
Ryan McBeth, thank you so much for being here today. It means so much. And being on the Not A Grayman Podcast. Welcome.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I always try to bring a gift whenever I come on a podcast. I would like you to have this.
Oh my, this is beautiful.
Do you want to open it now? Or,
absolutely.
All right,
Are you kidding me? This is my love language right here. And I just have to say, the wrapping and everything.
I am a guy.
You did a great job. I'm impressed, I have to say.
I don't know.
I'm so impressed. Wow. Well, this is so kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. When women wrap gifts, I don't know. Do women have some kind of innate ability to wrap gifts? Because I think I just kind of ball it up and put tape on it.
Yeah. No, we're definitely born with the skill set. Oh, wow. But that was impressive. Oh my gosh. I love this. Oh, wow. This is... you know what's funny? I literally saw this. I think I saw you wearing the Behoove shirt. Yeah. Oh, tell me about this.
Behoove. So Behoove, it's a saying they say a lot in the Army. It would behoove you to, whatever, right? And so I have a merch deal with Bunker Branding. It's a great company out of Texas. I was just down there a couple of weeks ago. I met Clint, who runs Bunker Branding's merchandise department. It's a fascinating operation there. I learned how they actually silkscreen everything. So Bunker Branding's been my merch provider for, years. And I love working with these guys. I come to them with an idea, and they make it a reality. And so Behoove kind of looks like a Ranger tab. We're going to be making some. I was never a Ranger, but you see that a lot, like a tab that'll say Behoove, or someone will create a fake tab that says window liquor. Or what's
the funniest one you've seen? What's the
funniest fake tab I've seen? Window liquor is probably up there. So once we had this guy, Jeffrey. Jeffrey was a very special boy. I can talk about Jeffrey.
Okay.
So, Jeffrey, he had a combat patch with an airborne tab on it. Mm-hmm. And one day, someone, I guess he had his uniform hanging up, or he was working in the Tactical Operations Center, and he had his uniform hanging on something, and someone took the airborne tab off and put on a tab that said window liquor, and he wore it for days until he realized that it was the wrong tab, right? Oh. Jeffrey, I was in Iraq, and we got so during the global war on terror, a lot of times, at least in Iraq, I was never in Afghanistan, but you were allowed to get 2 weeks of leave. They would send you home for 2 weeks. And I didn't really have anything.
Every how long?
Well, when you were there for a 1-year tour, they started the block leave process where you got 2 weeks leave. And, everyone's trying to go around Christmas, right?
Right.
But and this is during the surge when there was a rotation and all that. I remember if you didn't want to go on your leave, you could go on a pass to Qatar. I didn't really have anything to come home to. Jeffrey was a very special boy. This guy, he was one of those guys nobody liked, but I'm one of those guys that everybody likes and everybody gets along with me, right?
Yeah.
And so Jeffrey kind of thought he was my friend because I was friendly to him, right? Oh. So he was like, hey, bro, you want to go to Qatar together, bro? And I'm like, no, I don't want to go to Qatar with you. One funny thing is that there was, I think he was on duty this one night, and then the call came through Ryan, if you want to go to Qatar for your 4-day pass, get on that bird at BIOP at Baghdad International Airport right now. Yeah. So I got a ride. I managed to get a ride to the airport, got on the flight, went to Qatar.
Nice.
And Jeffrey did not come with me.
Why?
And because he was on guard duty or whatever. I don't remember the exact
sucks for
reason.
Jeffrey.
It sucks for Jeffrey. But now, so we land in Doha. We go to the base. And what's fascinating in Doha, you have all these hangars. And inside of these hangars, they'll have these little villages. Like, you get 3 beers a day there. You get like a beer ticket. So you're in these huge hangars, and they built like this village inside the hangars to look like a main street with bars that you could go down and you could order food, you could order beer, you have 3 a day. I think it went by your ID card.
Yeah.
And they also had donated clothes. So if you wanted to go out on the town, you could go to this donated clothes bin and like rummage through it and find like khaki pants and a polo shirt and go out on the town. So as soon as I landed, I met like this female E6. I think I was an E6 at the time. And I wasn't looking to, mess around with anybody. But it was fun just going out with another E6, and we would go on the town, we'd go to dinner together and stuff. What's funny is that the 4th day, I am going to check the flight schedule, see when I can get a plane back to Baghdad. And who do I see come down the hallway but Jeffrey? And he's following like a bunch of people who are trying to ignore him. And he's talking and talking and talking. And he sees me and goes, "Hey, McBeth, what's up? We're here together." And I was like, "Oh, hey,
at least you
Jeffrey."
stepped foot in Doha together, so he could at least check off that box.
I shook his hand, and he was like, "I'm going to hang out with my friends, and they're looking like, "No, please save us. We don't want him with us."
Oh my.
And this one dude, I said, this one dude, like, he started walking away. This one dude, like, broke off from the group. He came over to me. He's like, "Do you know that guy?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "How do you work with this guy?"
He'll talk your ear off.
He'll talk your freaking ear off. I guess they were on the plane together, and they're like, "Oh,
yeah, one of those.
He's a very special boy."
Yeah. Oh, you know what? But the world needs people like that, right? Like, it really, I love people like that. I love running into them personally. Like, I'm always extremely amused. I love people with that amount of, talkative energy. And
it must be nice to have that view of the world, where the world is just so simple. you know? And like, you just go through life oblivious. I don't know if you've seen that new Time Bandits show on Apple TV.
I haven't watched TV in ages.
Okay.
I have so much to get caught up on with popular culture that every time I'm asked about a show or something that comes out lately, I think the last show I watched was Narcos. And that's how I love that, right? I know. I loved it.
That was probably one of my favorite shows.
Which one did you like?
The first one was good. The second one was the Mexico one was. I think I like the first one better because I think that's more of a known story.
Yeah.
And you get to go, "Oh, that was when they caught so and so."
Absolutely.
I think that might have been more realistic, but the part with Kiki, Kiki Camarena, the guy who got executed by the drug cartel. I think that was kind of an unknown story.
Yeah.
But I also think when the show shifted to, what was his name? Michael Pena?
Yeah.
As opposed to the other guy who used to narrate, it lost some of its magic. Because one of the neat things was that, these are 2 guys who were fighting against this massive cartel.
Yes, exactly.
With very few resources. Right? And back then, you couldn't GPS track somebody. I mean, my God. And in the work that I do today, I find people.
Yeah.
Right. I write the software that finds bad guys. And even if the bad guy doesn't have one of these, I guarantee you his driver does.
Yeah.
And it is so easy to build pattern of life with one of these things. I know when you're going to work. I know when you're going to lunch. I know where you're going to lunch.
Yeah.
I can look at your internet history and go, "Oh, I know when you're online." Because most people, they wake up, the first thing they do is they take their phone and they take a look at all their notifications. They take a look at their Instagram.
Yeah.
They're up now.
Yeah. Oh gosh. And you have to wonder, obviously the algorithm is learning so much about us, the pattern of life. We are creatures of habit.
Yeah.
And there's so much I want to talk to you about in that space because, I know you have a background in computer science and I'm definitely so interested in the AI evolution and everything that's happening. My hope in the podcast is to be able to sort of index what makes us human because I think, I grew up at a time at the beginning of the internet And, I remember what it was like pre-internet, but then also the ease of having internet, and then how everything transformed in life, and then the information age, et cetera. But I think we're at that same type of precipice now where, my children's generation now will be like, oh, well, we were the last of when we were just human. You know what I mean? And now everything is sort of becoming automated and more efficient. I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, like in a lot of ways, the phone is like what do you call it? Like not a parasite,
we're a cyborg,
symbiote. Yeah, we're a cyborg.
Yeah.
We're just using our fingers and our eyes or ears or the interface. I guess the next step is to have this piped directly into our brain, which is in some ways might be kind of scary because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And what's kind of interesting is that I can think of a memory, and I know that it's a memory, but I can also imagine something. Like I can imagine myself flying on a dragon, but I know that's not a memory. Dragons don't exist.
Yeah.
Right? So the scary part is if we're piping this directly into our brain, what's a memory and what's a fantasy?
So can AI fantasize?
It can hallucinate.
That for sure. Yeah. But it's improving.
Fantasize?
I wonder. Do you need a soul to? I see. I'm going to get all philosophical.
Yeah.
I mean, you're usually like you're a very tactical guy. Like I'm probably taking you into some questions that you're not used to. But I wonder about the ability of AI if it's not sentient yet. Do you need to have that sentience to be able to imagine? I love imagination. I'm always daydreaming.
Yeah.
You're a very creative person. You have a YouTube channel and content create.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't know about, so one of the things, here's the way I explain it, because I know a little bit about AI. I work for a drone company that does AI work. Our drones fly on the battlefield not looking for, but if a medic says, hey, we need a whole blood transfusion, this drone will fly with a blood pack. It'll fly out to the medic. It'll drop it on a VS-17 panel that the medic threw out a window or put into a trench, and it'll fly back.
Amazing.
And it does it totally automated. We tell it where to go. It figures out how to get there and then figures out how to get back. And
pardon me, how large is this drone?
Well, the current prototype, which is it's the Theta prototype, is one of our chief scientists named I would have said Alpha Bravo Charlie. He's like Gamma Theta. Like what the?
He's on another level, literally.
In ancient Greece, why don't we use Roman numerals as well? Like. So
who needs a zero?
Yeah, I guess it's about. It's not very big. It's about as big as a pizza box, maybe 3 times as thick.
Wow.
We're only carrying maybe a pound or 1.5 liters.
That's amazing. That was going to be my next question. Is about like how much weight can it carry? But logistically, you're solving so much. Imagine now not having to figure out how a human's going to, send blood to transfuse on the battlefield through Aeromed. I should give an introduction about your the multiple hats that you wear. By the way, I love your hat, but you wear
Thank
many.
You.
You wear many. I don't know if they're all as fancy as the one that you have on right now. You were in the military, in the Army and National Guard, and over 20 years in the military. Thank you so much for your service.
I'll send you the bill.
Yeah, my tax dollars haven't been enough for sure to support what you guys do out, to keep us safe, and I appreciate you for that. You also work for Veloxxity, which is an intelligence.
It's a consulting company.
Okay, a consulting company, global consulting company. You do like geopolitical risk assessments and things.
I mean, not me personally in geopolitical risk, but if you were to you want to open up a mine in Botswana, you might want to contact Veloxxity and be like, hey, is it safe to do this? What are our escape routes? What are the dangers of doing this? What's the government like? That wouldn't necessarily be me doing that, but it's one of the capabilities of the company.
Nice. And then you are a content creator. I love your content so much. I love when you talk to your brain. Like those are my favorite. I'm like sitting there, just like my whole shorts feed is literally you talking to your brain at this point.
Yeah. Well, I started that. So normally I do like intelligence content. Like here's why Israel is using this weapon. Here's why Ukraine is using this tank. And I think I started those brain skits after October 7th because I just needed a break. And I needed to do something funny and creative.
Yeah.
And I just needed to laugh a little bit. I watched a lot of the Hamas Telegram footage in order to evaluate it and do videos about it. And a lot of that footage was disturbing. I mean, you're seeing people stand on other human beings and hold their heads up like trophies. You're seeing people go into rooms and shoot civilians. That was a bad day. And, I consider myself pretty, I don't know if I'm a psychopath, but, I find people, right? We use intel to find bad guys, and then we put a hellfire through their window. And afterwards, I go home, crack open a beer, order a pizza, and watch the Nationals. I'm okay with that. But some of the up close and personal stuff that I saw on October 7th, it was disturbing enough for me to want to change up what I was doing on Instagram and YouTube for just a little bit. And once in a while, when I come up with an idea for a brain skit, like I just do that. And the whole idea is that I'm talking to my brain, and my brain is smoking a cigarette and in a bathrobe, and its hair's messed up. And I guess the idea is that my brain usually gives me bad advice. Like you should eat this entire container of cheese balls.
I saw that. Great. No, and then it's like, no, I don't feel good. It's like, do it again.
And that's true. That's what we do.
It's interesting because the way that we're wired is that the brain actually, from what I've researched, the brain does not choose what's best for you. Like you're not doing what your choices are what's most comfortable and the easiest. And so if that means getting a drive-through burger, there's a person out there, his name's Brian Johnson. I love what he's doing. He has this whole Don't Die campaign, and he's trying to essentially increase longevity. But what he's done is map out what is best for each of our organs, because actually what your brain chooses for you to eat or how to act is actually not a good thing. It's why there are so many addictions out there. You're harming your kidneys with alcoholism, for example, yet your brain tells you, no, this is what's going to ease you or soothe you and all of that. But I hear you about the, just the horrible footage, the atrocious acts of violence that happen globally, terrorism, there's so much out there, and we're fed more and more of this that it is really beginning to put a dent into emotional well-being. And the reality is that this stuff happens and it's out there and it exists. And I think especially from the American perspective, people are not used to seeing what happens on the battleground or what happens in wartime or what happens in these moments. And now that it's so accessible and that the algorithm is pushing it out, it's really, it's impacted culture. It has definitely, it is a downer. There are so many times I think that when we're looking at this, especially with your background, like you need to, you are like, I feel like you're like the disinformation cop on the internet. It's like, is this real? Is it not? And for what it's worth, I have to say, like, I really appreciate how it's so factual with you. There's no like bias that you're bringing into it. You're really just looking at the facts. That's not easy for people to do. And I think it's not necessarily psychopathy. I mean, I'm not an expert, but it is your need to have to disassociate in order to make the right judgment of like, what is this actually? Because if you're putting emotion into it at that moment, then you're potentially flawed in your judgment or flawed in your assessment or analysis. Yeah.
And that's how you end up with, there's yellow cake in Iraq.
Right. Yeah.
Like emotional. All right, well, we need to find something.
We just marked the first Persian Gulf War.
So it's 2023. So if Back to the Future were set today, we'd go back to 1993.
Yeah.
Which doesn't feel that far away.
It doesn't at all.
30 years.
Well, we're 90s kids though too. So. Tell that to, like a 14-year-old now, they'll be like, literally, were you born in the 1900s?
Yeah.
Well, okay. Oh my God. Like I'm an 1800s person all of a sudden,
The 90s were great. You had the internet kind of, right? Like you had the internet, but it wasn't always on you. You had cell phones. But really you were using the call like, hey, we're going to meet up at this bar. Okay.
I had a pager. Did you?
Okay. Yeah, I did not have a pager.
Oh, okay. That was like my first deciphering stuff. It was like, okay, you literally had the numbers, the three numbers. You'd have to sit there and decrypt what the person was sending you in a message.
Yeah.
Early dating in the 90s, you guys.
But you had like MapQuest or something like that. If you're trying to get to a new place, we had to print all the directions out.
Oh my God.
It was like the 90s were great because it was this kind of hybrid of we're living in the future, but also we still had landlines. You could still not be reached. Mm-hmm. And, I woke up, I woke up today, I think I had about 25 emails, and that's a light day. Usually I wake up to about 100.
And when you wake up, are you immediately checking your phone, or are you giving yourself a break?
I am.
Okay.
That's my thing. I usually wake up and I check my phone because I need to see if anything's actionable. Is there anything did something happen overnight that I need to make a video about?
Yeah.
That's literally the first thing I do. And then I go over my emails and Twitter and Instagram. I try to answer people. I can't answer everybody. And if I get sent a manifesto, I'll either not read it, I'm sorry, or I'll drop it into ChatGPT. Right. I'm summarize this, Right. And of course I prioritize anything from Aeromed Lab and anything from my boss at Veloxxity. That always gets prioritized. And then I read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Haaretz, cover to cover, just to see if there's anything going on in the world. And usually that takes about 2 hours, and I have to go work out. And I actually do work out in the morning. I'll take a bike ride. I actually haven't been running lately because I hurt my foot.
Oh, no.
I've been doing some physical therapy on that. I've been, it's like a plantar tendon issue.
I remember when I was pregnant, I got one of those plantar, what is it called? Fasciitis?
Plantar fasciitis.
Yeah, that. Thank you. I got these inserts for my shoes. Pregnancy is tough for women.
Well, I would imagine. I mean, it's like you have this thing growing inside. It's like this parasite, right? And it's sucking all your nutrients out, right? And that's when you're like, man, I could really go for some ice cream and pickles, right? Because you need vitamin G or something like that, right? And that's only in ice cream and pickles.
That's funny. I was hitting up the Chick-fil-A drive-thru every day.
That sounds delicious.
I would have, you know what it was? The frosted lemonade. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm a caffeine addict, but I couldn't have any caffeine.
Oh, because of the baby?
Yeah, you can't have caffeine. So I get hardcore. When I was pregnant, I didn't have any caffeine. Yeah. I never took any medicine. Yeah. Unless, I don't think I even took a vitamin unless I needed it. I think I needed vitamin D.
If I prenatal vitamins. Right?
Yeah, the prenatal and vitamin D. But I wouldn't, if I had a headache, I was like, I'm not taking anything. There's nothing wrong with, you can take it. I went overboard. Yeah. But anyways, I don't know how this is a tangent.
No, you know what is kind of funny is that Jake Bro, who's another YouTuber, he always jokes that people call him a CIA shill. And he's like, yeah, the CIA pays me in Chick-fil-A, which shoot, I'll work for the CIA if they pay me in Chick-fil-A. That sounds great.
Oh gosh,
it sounds delicious. I get that, Colin. You're nothing but a paid shill for the CIA. I'm like, tell me the charge code. I'd love to get some extra money on this because us YouTubers we're famous, not rich. Right? I was telling you before the show, I just recently was able to hit the same amount of money I made as a cleared software developer. I'm not, this thing. I do have a nice watch, but I bought this back when I was a software engineer. I couldn't afford this now.
Yeah.
Right. It is nice working for yourself.
It's a nice watch, though.
Thank you.
Really nice.
Thank you. I
love the orange band.
I love that. Yeah, orange is my favorite color. And, it is a nice watch, but like these days, like, I don't buy anything for myself. I live a pretty frugal life. I don't, I don't go on trips. I mean, I do go on trips, but they're all work related.
Yeah.
Right? I mainly just stay home, and I enjoy cigars. I enjoy a little drink now and then. But for the most part, it's all just work.
Yeah. What's your cigar of choice?
There is this cigar from Mr. Cigars in Miami, and they have these Lanceros, which are just absolutely amazing. Although these cigars here are pretty good. These Corona Cigar Company. I like these as well. I actually brought these, and I can't smoke on this particular podcast, but I brought them just in case.
Oh.
But I usually these Lanceros.
When I have my own studio, maybe. Yeah. When I have my own studio, I'll have you back on, and you can have a cigar.
Thank you. These long, thin Lanceros. Lanceros are very difficult to make because there's not a lot of room for error in a Lancero because they're so thin. The size of a pencil usually.
Oh wow.
Or the thickness of a pencil. So I really like Lanceros, mainly because I can, one of my favorite things to do is I smoke while I write. So people think that I riff off of, sometimes I do. But usually when I'm going through my writing process for YouTube videos, I write everything out in a script. And typically I can usually memorize a script pretty easily. Especially when I'm writing it. I have a pretty good memory in that regard. Although sometimes I have the script up on screen because if I'm saying like Bakhmut, like, all right, how is that pronounced again? I'll have it written out phonetically, So I have that. But usually when I write, I'm smoking. That's cool. A Lancero, I don't have this huge, Sharpie marker in my mouth. I have a little pencil and I can smoke while I write at the same time.
That's cool.
So I guess that's one of the reasons I really like Lanceros. And God, the amount of writing I did 20 pages yesterday of writing.
That's good.
For a video that's coming up. And I shot it. I did the 20 pages. I shot it. Now I have to edit it. And that's going to take at least 3 days to do.
Oh, wow.
People don't realize how much work goes into it.
Right. It is a lot of work. And then if you're doing it all yourself, I guess you don't have a team around you to...
I know.
Do the editing and all that.
Once in a while, I have a researcher that I'll pay. And that's just like, dude, I don't have enough time to do all this stuff. So go research this. Usually it's all me because like if I'm showing a T90, if I'm talking about a T90, which is a Russian tank, I can't show a T72.
Right. You have to have.
I have to have it. And most people don't know that. And also like what I do is very, usually I'm showing a video or I'm showing an image every 10 to 15 seconds because I'm talking about something and then I'll show the image or I'll show the video.
Yeah.
And, people need to know my vision and I'm not telepathic yet. And the amount of time it would take for me to communicate this vision. And plus, then I have to pay these people. So we're talking $25, $30 an hour to a video editor at the least. And for a YouTube video, if you don't have mid-rolls, you might make maybe $300, if that.
Why do you say if you don't have mid-rolls? Why?
So a mid-roll, in YouTube. So in YouTube, you make money by the ads that are shown at the beginning of the video and the ads that are shown at the end of the video. And if the video is over 8 minutes long, cha-ching, you get at least one mid-roll. And a mid-roll is somewhere between 3 minutes and 5 minutes. They're going to show an ad. And that bumps up your profit. That's like a cha-ching moment there. That could bump up your profit to $600 to $1,000. If you have multiple mid-rolls, so let's say you have a 40-minute video and there's multiple mid-rolls in that, now you're seeing $2,000, $3,000, maybe up to $10,000. I've never made that amount of money, but theoretically, yeah, you could.
Wow.
That's assuming people watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because usually people start falling off after about 5 minutes or so. In my case at least, only about 33% of people actually watch the whole video.
This is interesting to me. Yeah. So like what type of information that you're dealing with has the most retention from an audience perspective? What are people interested in? Is it the Russian tanks? Is it Ukraine? Is it Gaza? Like what's happening in the world of
usually
retention?
Anything with combat footage is pretty popular. And that's where I'll show combat footage and then explain, okay, these people did this, and here's why they went and did this.
I see.
And here's why they went and did this. The only problem is that on YouTube, it's very tough to show, so I have to blur a lot of stuff out. So I send people to RyanMcBeth.substack.com where I can actually show people violence. And I do have one rule about that. I never show violence for the sake of showing violence. I might show someone getting their head cut off, but I'm like, you see the patch that guy's wearing? Well, that patch signifies they're in the 75th Motor Rifle Regiment. And that's pretty interesting because it hasn't operated near this town in a while.
You have such an acute eye when it comes to like picking up on details, like something like a patch, as simple as just like zooming in on a patch or something. That's really quite remarkable. Where does that come from?
I'm probably writing software and finding bugs. I'm trained as a software engineer. While I was in the military, I got a degree in computer science and then another degree in engineering management, which is like an MBA for engineers. And then I got a third degree in, an MSc in cybersecurity. So I have a master's.
Wow. You have 2 master's degrees.
I was MSc.
That's awesome.
So one of the things I was really good at is I'm not the greatest writer of code when it comes to I'm actually going to write code that does something. What I'm really, really good at is I'm really good at writing code to fix bugs. So I've always been the guy, and for a while I was at this one company where all I did was fix software bugs, and I was in absolute heaven. Because number one, most people, they don't like to do that. Most developers don't like to find bugs. But to me, it was like being like a murder detective. Like, all right, someone wrote a piece of software and all of a sudden date doesn't work anymore. All right, let me look into that. Oh, here's what they did. They created a slider box that went from 0 to 24. Well, there is no 24 hours. The clock turns over at 23 hours. So that's why this isn't working, because someone selected 24 and there is no 24 hour, right?
Wow.
So, but I was really good at that. I wasn't very good at like, Ryan, write new software. I could do it.
Yeah.
But Ryan, go find this bug. I just had this tenacity to do it, and I was really good at that. And I think a lot of that translated over to when I started working for Accenture Federal Services doing C4ISR, which means command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. I got really good at writing the software that found the bad guys, or doing the debugging or doing the integration for the software that found the bad guys. And I don't know. I guess it was just that initial time debugging, and also the other software I wrote was called cross-domain solutions. And every time I talk about this, I get a call from DISA. But cross-domain solutions are basically where you pass information from the low side or an area of low trust to an area of high trust. So if I have a camera on a drone, that camera that's looking at the battlefield, well, it's sucking in data that's unclassified, right? But that data has to get to a classified area. And when it gets to that classified area, you need to pass it through some sort of piece of software that inspects that data coming in to make sure that there's no bad data coming in or enemy data coming in. Because let's say the enemy could hold up a sign or something with code on it that could crash your computer system, right? You want to make sure that information isn't coming in, so you might cancel that out or send that to ground. Now, that's a very juvenile example, but that's kind of what cross-domain solutions do. You could have a temperature monitor on a sensor, right? The only information you should be getting in is temperature data. You shouldn't be getting text. You shouldn't be getting audio. You should be getting temperature data. So a cross-domain solution might take that information and go, hey, this isn't temperature data, send it to ground.
Right.
And don't let this information through. And by the way, notify somebody that this is coming through because someone might have compromised your temperature sensor. Internet of Things should scare the hell out of you.
Okay, so tell me, can you, what keeps you up at night? Is it Internet of Things? And before you, if it's not, then talk to me about what are some of the most positive and like the scariest trends though as well that you're seeing in IoT.
I guess what keeps me up at night is acid reflux, but I am almost 50. I also go to the bathroom a lot. The thing that kind of keeps me up at night is organized disinformation, especially centered around AI.
Right.
One of the things that I saw, and I'm not a very political guy, but I am into fighting disinformation. One of the things I've seen is it seems like during this election campaign, and by the time this goes up, the election might be over, but one of the things I've seen is that both the Trump campaign and the Harris campaign, they seem to have this obsession about crowd sizes. Who has bigger crowd sizes?
Okay. And
one of the things that I saw was someone on the left wing created fake AI generated images to show it was someone on the right wing, someone on the right wing created fake AI generated images implying that a Harris campaign was filled with people in the hopes that people would think that someone on the right wing had created this to convince people that Trump had a bigger crowd size than Harris. So now we're at the point where people are using AI to accuse someone else of using AI.
Right.
And there was
to bring on that embarrassment, like, they're essentially like you're falsifying the information to make it look like you're more popular than you are.
Yeah, and I can see a point where we're not going to be able to introduce video evidence in court. I can see that point because AI can just be so pervasive, and right now we're just finally reaching the end of the era where you're seeing people with 6 fingers. However, and we had talked about this before about like hallucination. One kind of good thing is that like photo generating AI or even video generating AI, it doesn't necessarily know what it's generating. Mm-hmm. And that kind of leads me back to there was a video of these Israelis who were using a trebuchet, like a catapult, right, to launch these flaming fireballs over their wall. So the fireballs would explode and burn some grass that was in front of their thing. It was a very creative way of, these guys are probably bored. They're in the north, near Lebanon. They're bored out of their minds. Let's make a trebuchet, right? They find the plans on the internet. Someone's a carpenter. They build it. And it worked. And some people said, is this AI? And one of the things I considered was that some of these Israelis were wearing PPE, personal protective equipment, their gloves, iPro. They're carrying a fire extinguisher. And AI is very good at creating fire. AI is very good at creating trebuchets. AI is not so good at understanding that fire is hot and dangerous, at least image generating AI.
Right.
So AI wouldn't necessarily know, all right, well,
Couldn't you prompt it, though? Like, prompt it to include that?
You could probably prompt it to say some people are wearing fire extinguishers and gloves. Yeah. But a lot of it, and this is kind of one of the issues with so few people being in the military. I think as of 2022, only 6% of anybody has served in the military, at least in the U.S. So you would have to know that first. You'd have to know that at that base, there's most likely a first sergeant or even a sergeant major who's like, all right, I'm going to let you build this trebuchet, but you have to have a fire extinguisher on you when you fire it because we're not having this thing explode in the courtyard and then people get burned. And that's one of those things that like you have to serve to kind of know intuitively that someone is going to be complaining about personal protective equipment.
Yeah.
So the odds of someone programming that or prompting that are a little bit lower. And the software just doesn't know how to do that yet.
I see. So yeah, it takes a much more sophisticated effort to try to come up with that level of accuracy. But then what I am definitely concerned about, like with the run up to the election, the use of AI to create these false narratives, et cetera, et cetera. We're kind of in this period where, the AI is still, you're able to see that it's like, okay, this is AI generated. Are there companies out there or efforts out there, to your knowledge, that are trying to, like some type of software that will automatically detect that this is actually AI generated?
Yeah. I work with one of them. My God, their name's slipped my mind. DeepMind.ai. That could be one. Cyabra does a great job. I work with Cyabra. They are. Those are two companies in particular that are looking at AI generated text. Cyabra had Bot Busters for a while, though I think they integrated that into their main product.
What do you think is moving faster? Like, are they moving fast enough to be able to keep up with the false narratives?
No, they're not. And when you think about it, there is an industry. There's more people in the industry who want to create chaos than fight chaos. Right. And
also states, right?
And states. I look at, someone actually sent me, I think it was called C.AI or character.ai. And they're like, Ryan, you should create a Ryan character and then just use all the data from your previous videos. And then it could save you time making videos. You just generate a Ryan McBeth AI character and have that make the videos. Right. And that sounds great. It sounds like I would save myself a lot of time. But it's also kind of terrifying, because then that thing could make me say things that I wouldn't necessarily say. I would never say. It would be nice for it to generate me with a girlfriend. That would be kind of cool. But I don't see that happening. It's like, well, we're not freaking miracle workers there, Ryan. But I can see how AI could be the profit motives for creating those characters, even if it's for fun. Like I make a little bit of money off Cameo, not a lot, but people will. I set the price as low as possible. That way, fans could ask me to get a birthday greeting to their dad or whatever, right? And Cameo, I could easily see a company like character.ai just sucking down my likeness, sucking down my voice, and providing greetings for family members, like, hey guys, it's Ryan McBeth here, and I just want to say happy birthday. Yeah. Well, that's something that I could have made $30 on, right? And now character.ai is allowing you to do it for free. Yeah. That's kind of scary to me as a content creator. Or even, what if someone thinks they're talking to me? What if someone uses character.ai to fake a phone call? Like, I message someone in the comments, like, hey, you just want a drone. Call me on WhatsApp at this number. And then someone speaks as me using character AI, like, hey, it's Ryan McBeth. Oh, wow, your voice sounds similar, right? Would you question that? You might question that, because the person is speaking just like I might speak. And that's how you scam people. Ryan McBeth is scamming people. Oh, no, it was someone created an AI. I mean, we saw that in Maryland. I think it was in Prince George's County. There was Montgomery County. There was a high school principal who made his gym teacher mad, and the gym teacher made an AI of him talking about students in an inappropriate way. And it wasn't until they looked on the gym teacher's computer, like he had searched for AI modification stuff. But that's kind of scary. But yeah, there's more profit motive to actually do bad things with AI or do interesting, fun things with AI than there is to actually fight it.
I worry about the future of AI integration into exploiting people and saying things that they didn't say. And I mean, at the very least, there's so much. I want to talk about AI in the battlefield. Yeah. First of all, I love what Aeromed is doing.
Thank you.
How long has the company been around? And since when have you been actually using the drone technology to deliver blood? Yeah. And also, to the extent that you can talk about it, where are sort of the spots that you're most active?
Okay. So Aeromed Lab, it's been around for probably about 2 years now in one form or another. Initially, this was started at University of Texas at Dallas as kind of like a passion project from a guy who was a PhD student. And it kind of morphed into this company called Aeromed Lab. I was brought in about a year ago to take a look at the technology and just kind of be their military advisor. Like, hey, how can we solve this thing with the military? Yeah. And, one of the things I said was that, like, look, initially they thought, oh, these are going to be combat drones and they're going to hit each other with sticks and shoot nets at other combat drones. And I'm like, that's great that you can use AI as part of a drone swarm to shoot down other drones. Everybody's shooting down drones. You know what we need to worry about right now? We need to worry about whole blood in soldiers. One of the issues that we're going to have on the future battlefield is that the days of medevac helicopters are over. When I went to combat, and I don't even call that combat because it was more like, hey, Ryan, drive down this road. We want to see who blows you up, right? It wasn't.
That's frightening.
It is frightening, but it's not Ukraine where you're under. I've been under mortar fire, but not like Ukraine, not for days at a time. I've been, what was that? We just got mortared? Yeah, I think so. I've been under that. I haven't been under hours, days of artillery fire. So one of the during the global war on terror, if you got shot, if you got blown up, call a medevac. We had total control of the skies. Call a medevac. Medevac comes, picks you up. It takes you back to the CASH, the Combat Support Hospital. They call them field hospitals now, I think. Mm-hmm. You were able to get whole blood in your body during the golden hour, which is there's that 1 hour window where extraordinary treatments can save your life.
Yes.
Now, with Aeromed Lab, one of the things we realized is that after Ukraine, what we saw was that you cannot get helicopters in. They will get shot down by the adversary. The adversary does not care about that Red Cross in the helicopter, or they can't see it on radar. So they're just going to shoot you down. Yeah. No matter what you are. And so right now in Ukraine, as you and I are speaking, there are people bleeding to death. There are Ukrainian soldiers who are bleeding to death. And they need whole blood. And they can't get that whole blood to them. And normally you take the soldier to the blood, get the helicopter in. Now you can't. So now we have to figure out a way to get whole blood into that soldier until they can be evacuated by ground ambulance, which could take hours, could take days to get that soldier back.
Right, considering those conditions.
And their outcomes, I think it's 66% survive, and we can get them whole blood within the first hour. Although Stephanie, the CEO, might be a little mad at me throwing out figures without the actual figure sheets in front of me, but it's around that. It's your outcomes are a lot better if you can get whole blood into a soldier within that hour. Mm-hmm. So here's a problem. If you're a medic and you've established a casualty collection point, usually you're inside a building, inside a trench, inside a bunker, something. There are existing solutions, companies like Zipline, which can fly blood out to a certain point, drop it, and then fly back. That's great if you're in an uncontested environment like Africa. No one's trying to shoot you down. No one's trying to jam you. What our drones do is we tell them where to go. The drone figures out where it needs to go on its own. It uses a totally autonomous delivery solution where we're using terrain matching, we're using satellite imagery. Yeah. We have information from previous, because every time you go out, you're learning information about the battlefield, and that becomes additional training data. So now the drones can share that data of, oh, hey, this house isn't there anymore, it got blown up. So now you can take that blood, and we can actually deliver that blood directly to the medic that needs it, and we can drop it through a window. Wow. We can literally throw it through a window. Yeah, that's trivial. That's trivial doing that just on like using AI. AI knows how to do all that stuff. We drop it through a window, drop it into a trench, drop it into the slit of a bunker. Now the medic doesn't have to leave to get that whole blood, and then it flies back.
Wow.
And we're prepared for the next mission.
Where's it flying from?
So typically it would be flying from the cache or the combat or the field hospital, or a pickup truck that we have as a charging station at that field hospital.
Okay.
So a medevac order comes in or a blood order comes in. The field hospital comes out to the Aeromed labs, take this blood, take this O negative out to this location, put in the mission planning tool, put it on the drone flies it out. It's in a thermos bottle, not like a Stanley cup, but soft packaging that can help absorb the landing.
That's remarkable. You guys are saving lives. That's a remarkable effort, and I love that the company is being able to provide those types of solutions and really easing the logistical process because, in wartime, the most difficult thing is maintaining the logistical supply line. Which, speaking of, have you been? Did you see what's going on in Canada and?
The train,
what's going on in the world? Logistically, the world is just. How well prepared are we logistically as the United States? Do you feel like when it comes to, I think of like semiconductor security, and I think of even things like our antibiotics being manufactured in China. Where do you see the future going in that space? Are we improving? Right now, North America has a problem considering what Canada has just gone through with the logistical disruption. What are your thoughts on this?
So we are improving when it comes to semiconductors, and we passed the
Semiconductor Act.
Semiconductor Act. Yeah, it was like the CHIPS Act or something like that.
The CHIPS Act. Yes. Thank you.
But we passed that, and we need to bring. I mean, semiconductors are the steel of World War II, right? Mm-hmm. Like modern semiconductors are necessary for things like machine tools, CNC manufacturing, computer numeric control manufacturing. One of the reasons Russia is having a hard time building stuff is that they have a finite number of machine tools, and they don't have a machine tool industry. So every time they are machining something, you have a choice. You can machine a part for your oil rigs that are all Western designed and breaking down because they can't get Western parts, or you can build a part for a tank, or you can build a part to create your own machine tool. And that's kind of the dilemma, right? Mm-hmm. Like what kind of part do I build? Because I need the oil rig to get the money to fight the war. I need the tank part to fight the war. I need the machine tool part to build new machine tools to keep building stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the question.
The dilemma.
I think, it's a dilemma. And I think that we're getting better on chips. It's going to take a little while. One of the things I've advocated for is a national chip stockpile.
Yeah.
We have
our strategic reserve of petroleum.
We have a strategic reserve of cheese in a cave of Missouri.
Really?
In a cave in Missouri.
It's in Missouri and not Wisconsin?
Okay. Yeah. It's I guess it's like an old salt cave. I don't know how many of them they have in Wisconsin. But it is. I think it started during the Carter administration, where they're just buying up cheese in order to
listen,
increase
as someone
the
who
price
loves my
of dairy.
fromage, I have to say I am very pleased about that. Okay, it's nice to know at least if we're going down, we'll be able to enjoy some cheese on.
I think it's like 1.4 billion pounds of cheese.
That's so random. How do you know this?
Because one of the things because I made a video. Well, not a video. One of the things I talk about is I did this presentation called "How America Loses the Next War." Mm-hmm. And I talked about how we need a national chip stockpile. And while doing this, I did a research. We have a national helium stockpile. We have a national oil reserve. We have a national reserve of cheese. We have no national chip reserve. Yeah. And it might not be a bad idea for when we build things like Stinger missiles to take 10% of those chips and put them in a strategic stockpile.
Yes.
Order 110% instead of 100%.
Right.
Put them in a strategic stockpile.
I love this idea.
This is one of the issues we had with Ukraine is that I believe, well, at least with the Stinger, we hadn't created any new Stinger missiles since I want to say 2008. And so when we went back to the manufacturer and we said like, hey, we gave Ukraine a bunch of Stinger missiles. We need new ones. They're like, yeah, this manufacturer went out of business. This chip doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, no.
So we had to like redesign the Stinger missile really quick.
Using alternatives. Now, Tesla did that in during the pandemic. Right, COVID.
During COVID, they switched chip suppliers and they were able to do that. The government and at least military contractors, they don't tend to work that fast. They figured it out. But to have a national chip stockpile would have made that a lot easier to manufacture new weapon systems. So I think we're doing okay with that. I know when it comes to things like food, like most American supermarkets only have like 1.5 days worth of food on hand.
Right. Yeah, we see that during natural disasters, how quickly the shelves will empty. I remember when, because I have kids, I remember when there was a formula shortage. And oh my God,
during the pandemic, right?
Geez, it literally during the pandemic. Yeah. And, people have different circumstances and things. And I remember there was like this mom group over who has an extra supply of milk to be able to give babies just in case.
Like breast milk?
Yeah. I'm not even kidding. And this is where you start seeing community congregate and come together. Yeah. Oh my God. There was a literal shortage of formula. Like this was, I think, who was the president? It was Trump. And, this became a national emergency.
I remember this. Yeah. Yeah. And
this is what us moms talk about is like stockpile formula.
Why was there a formula? And that stuff expires.
So what happened, right? I think, was there was a contamination or something. I could be wrong, but if I remember correctly, something happened in the supply.
Formula isn't like different kids take different kinds of formula, right? Like you can't, like if one kid is drinking Similac, they might not necessarily handle Infamil or something, right?
I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I would imagine. I'm
like the last person. I would be a horrible father. I would be like the absolute worst.
Well, okay, so I'd love to
let Daddy finish his drink and he'll get you your medicine.
I'd love to. I question that. Like you're like super cool.
I'm a great uncle.
I bet.
I'll take you to the gun range. Uncle. We'll go to the bar. Right. Well, you can't sit at the bar, but I'll talk to them.
It's kind of like, my parents always said, parenting is tough, but grandparenting is super fun. And, I think that maybe you fall into the space of not having to do the discipline side of parenting, but just enjoying being the fun uncle.
Oh God. I once took I have a Tesla,
uncle, right? Do you have a
I do. And I took, so my brother has two younger kids and, I think like 8 and 5. And, my brother was like, hey, let's take him out in your Tesla. And he lives in the middle of nowhere in New Jersey. And, I got that Tesla fast. To the point where the kids were getting scared, and I'm like, all right, I'll back off because one of them was getting really freaked out, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to turn this into a bad experience.
Do you have an S model or something that was what? You were what Tesla do you have that you were able to gun?
I have a Model 3. Okay, but it
still goes fast like that.
It is I think the Model 3 is the best car I've ever had. And I am not an Elon Musk fanboy or a Tesla. It is a car. I don't really put anything more into it than that. But what's kind of fascinating is that the car keeps getting better. Now, the trim, it would be nice. There's a problem with the door side trim. It would be nice if they could freaking fix that. I shouldn't get in my car and the trim pops off. Yeah. But software stuff, it just keeps getting better.
Nice.
And the car is fast. When you put it into sport mode, I don't know how fast I can go from 0 to 60, but it goes fast.
Nice.
And one of the things I like about it is, I go to Virginia Beach a lot. I have a friend of mine down there that I see once in a while, and I'll stay there. And going down there, I have to charge twice, which kind of sucks. I should have got the long range model, but what's kind of neat is that I just put that thing in auto drive, and it's almost like you can turn some of your brain off. You still have to be alert, But driving in Virginia and Maryland, it's like Mad Max Fury Road every day, especially Northern Virginia. And when I have my car in auto drive, it's like, oh, cut me off, knock yourself out. Great. I don't get mad, like I'm not, and there's no road rage. Like I can just listen to a podcast. The car is driving itself. I don't want, why get mad?
Yeah.
It's fine. I'm getting there. The car's driving. You just arrive so much more relaxed than you would. And I think a lot of the anger you see in Nova in Northern Virginia comes from start, stop around 495 and
yeah, people hitting brakes unnecessarily.
Yeah, the car does it for me.
Yeah.
I'm just listening to a podcast.
That is awesome.
That's wonderful.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll probably get to the point where actually driving a car is more of a pastime, kind of like people that collect these old vehicles,
I can see a point where one day only the very wealthy and the very poor drive their own cars. Very wealthy will have supercars, or they collect really old, classic
kind of
cars.
Like the nouveau riche type of class that's come out of China.
One interesting thing, when I was in Australia a couple of weeks ago, I was at tea time. I was invited to tea, like high tea, and there's a difference between tea and high tea. High tea has like cakes, right? So I was invited to high tea, and I'd never been to high tea before. Yeah. And I am, my family is from Northern Ireland, and we do drink tea, but we don't have like a tea ritual. It's more like, you want a wee cup of tea, son? Like, Dad, that's a regular cup of tea. But what's interesting is that high tea is like, there's this whole ritual to it. And I went to high tea, and this nice Indian woman explained to me, like, how you do everything. And I was going to eat a little cake with my fingers. She's like, no, you use this little spoon, And while I was there, apparently in Australia right now, like a lot of Chinese tourists go to Australia. And I watched this Chinese woman come in, and she took a cup, like a paper cup, and she took the cup and she took cakes and piled them into the cup.
Oh, interesting.
And then put it back on and left. And I asked about that. I asked this colleague of mine from the Australian Department of Defense. I was like, why did they do that? Like, well, people in China, like they're used to fighting for everything. There's just so many people. And
so it's a scarcity mindset.
When there's something free, you take as much of that free thing as you can. I never thought of that.
Yeah.
There was another funny. I was at like not a coyote. What do you call them? Kangaroo preserve that they have there. There's kangaroos and koalas and stuff. And there's this little fence, and the kangaroos, they can leave that little enclosure. It's like a rope, like you're going to the club, right? A little velvet rope.
Velvet rope.
Yeah, and the kangaroos know that, like, if they're beyond that velvet rope, no one will come and touch them. No one will come and do anything to them. And so this one particular kangaroo, or this one particular Chinese family, like there were signs in the velvet rope that said, like, do not go over this rope. Like, this is a kangaroo rest area. So they went over the rope, and they're taking pictures, like, squatting next to the kangaroo. I was like, there's a sign. Even if you don't read English, there is a sign on this rope that has a man with a slash through it. I don't care where you are on the planet. I don't care what language. Yeah, you should be able to interpret that. But I don't know if that's because they're Chinese or because just like they're rude people everywhere, right?
Yeah,
who think the rules don't apply to them. I see a man with a slash. I'm probably going to listen to that sign because I don't want this kangaroo punching me in the face with its freaking kangaroo feet.
Oh yeah.
I can't,
the poundage on one of those must be intense.
I can't. I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't want to find out. You got to know what?
I got hit by a horse once.
How'd you get hit by a horse?
I was walking behind it, and it just kicked
me. It just
me.
Decided to kick you.
And I had a bruise for probably 3 weeks.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I was a little kid.
Oh, what's kind of like to me, like horseback riding is one of those things that sounds kind of fun.
Yeah.
And I know they do horseback riding in Virginia Beach. But it's never been one of those things where it's like, I mean, I like to go kayaking. I like to go paddle boarding.
Yeah.
I've never once said like, oh, let's go horseback. Like in my head, like I think, oh, this sounds
Maybe
like
try something new. What's that place? There's a island actually, I think not far from Virginia Beach that has wild horses.
I think I know what you're talking about.
No, not the Outer Banks. It's called like not Saskatchewan, but like something like that.
They have wild
in Canada,
horses, right?
Wild horses along the beach, and it's supposedly gorgeous. It's called. I'll insert the name, but anyways, it is supposedly beautiful.
Yeah.
So maybe worth checking out. Take your kayak out there.
I guess.
Check out some wild horses. Just don't get hit by one.
Well, how much is a horse? Like a 2,000-pound animal, 800-pound animal? I don't know. When you're the horse, like you're in their world.
Yeah.
Right. Like if that horse wants to beat you to death, it's just going to fold you up like a napkin.
Yeah.
Right. And it sounds like a fun thing to do, but I would imagine like that when you're on a horse, it's probably a fairly stressful thing because like this animal, like it might listen to you. I've heard like their ears go back, like when they're like, okay, I'm listening for a command. What do you want me to do? But I also feel like that horse is going to do whatever the hell it wants to do.
I don't know. Something about the human horse relationship.
Yeah.
That is just meant to be coupled with one another. I
buy that.
Yeah.
I mean, supposedly that's one of the reasons like people in South America never really developed. Like they didn't have a lot of domestic animals. I think this is not my theory. It came from Guns, Germs, and Steel. This book, but not a novel, it's a nonfiction book. But this theory that like, things like sheep and chickens and stuff that allowed people to get protein, number one. Number two, they actually had a lot of diseases. And so by these animals, cows, sheep, pork, chicken, those diseases would migrate to humans and make those humans sick, but in a way that was good because it gave you, the ones who survived had more immunity.
Yeah.
Well, then you roll into South America, they got llamas, and nobody ever tried to hook up a llama to a cart. Right. And they didn't have a lot of domesticated animals. And so like there's less protein, there's less, ways to have agriculture and feed everybody. I mean, corn is great.
Yeah.
I don't know how much nutrition's in corn, right? But obviously not enough to have a society like Europe, right? So if you think about it, like when did Native Americans start to flourish? I guess when horses were introduced to the continent and they went wild and they could, wow, I can hunt buffalo with this thing. This thing's great.
Tame them and get on a horseback and bow and arrow. I love the relationship between humans and the domestication of animals and how that really has gotten us to where we are.
Yeah. And when you think about it, a horse is a way of converting grass to work.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, horsepower.
Right.
It's like the amount of weight. I think like the amount of weight a horse can lift in a certain amount of seconds or something like that. One of those very patriarchal type measurements, right? But you give this thing grass and all of a sudden it's doing work for you. It's moving, not windmills, like moving a grain mill or something like that. Or it's moving your goods from market to, from your farm to your market. And it's pooping for you, and you can put that poop on the field. Yeah.
I remember the story of when Gaddafi, after the revolution, after the Arab Spring, I don't know if this is true, but I heard the story that so it goes that the Emiratis wanted to preserve the very unique Arabian horses that Gaddafi had. They were these purebred Arabian black horses and white, just pure black, pure white, gorgeous, like genetically almost perfect. And Gaddafi had a series of these horses, and the Emiratis airlifted them out of Libya at the start of the revolution because they wanted to preserve these horses' DNA, essentially.
Wow. They didn't take Gaddafi, but...
it didn't work out well for Gaddafi. I hope it worked out better for those horses.
That guy, he certainly had a personality.
Yeah. To be in power for 40 years like that and dictate.
And his Amazon guard force.
Do you remember when he went to the UN General Assembly? He would bring these massive tents And the Secret Service never really knew what to do with this type of stuff, because it's like they would want to mount these tents throughout New Jersey and New York and things.
Yeah, he wants to live like a Bedouin. Right?
Yeah. Well, and it was like his place of like bringing people that wanted to meet with him or something like that.
Mr. Gaddafi pitched his tent on Donald Trump's property in Bedford and caused a stir. It was not a camping tent, but a ceremonial tent for receiving guests. But officials in the town expressed outrage. The town issued a stop work order on the tent, claiming legal permits were not obtained. A company spokesman said Trump asked the tenant occupying the property to remove the tent, and the tenant complied. The Libyans first asked to pitch the tent in New York's Central Park, but that was denied. Mr. Gaddafi then tried the New Jersey suburb of Englewood. The mayor's response was hostile.
I don't want him on U.S. soil. I don't want him sleeping in my city.
Many Americans are angry at Mr. Gaddafi's welcome home of the only person convicted in the 1988 Pan Am bombing over Lockerbie, Scotland. 38 of the 270 people who died in Lockerbie came from New Jersey.
He also gave the longest speech in UN history. And I remember the translator that he had passed out and was so frightened that he'd be imprisoned, because he passed out during this like 4-hour speech. I mean, imagine just like, simultaneous translation, the amount of brain power that would take for that translator. And the interpreter just passed out. And I don't know what happened to him. Someone should check on the interpreter of Gaddafi during that UN speech. But
I have a hard time. I mean, I can't speak Arabic that well anymore, but I have a hard time. Like it is kind of weird. It's like, I don't want to say I get a headache, but it gets tiring. Trying to, because I can't think in Arabic. I can think in Arabic, afwan. Like I can say thank, you're welcome easily.
Yeah.
I don't have to think about saying thank you or you're welcome.
Yeah.
But if you're like actually talking to somebody, you really have to like think, and that's not easy to do.
Yeah. Or the online disinformation cop. But I saw this one video of your mom actually, tapping in one time to help you with a disinformation or not video. What shaped you into the person that you are? What type of parenting style did your parents have?
That's a good question. So I'm one of four. Mm-hmm. I'm a middle child, which I've been told explains a lot about me. My dad, he worked in a warehouse and later managed that warehouse. My mom, she was either a stay-at-home mom. This is the 70s, right? She was either a stay-at-home mom or had, had like minor jobs. I think she sold cell phones once, or was a secretary and stuff, as we got older. But
was it like those big cell phone blocks?
Yeah, like those big, bricks, or back when you had a car phone.
Was like that's good commission. That was like probably $3,000 or not at the time. It was like the equivalent of, it was probably like, $1,000 then.
But, we grew up, we didn't have a lot of money. I don't want to say it was one of those things where it was like, we knew, we didn't know we were poor. Like, believe me, I knew we were poor. Well, one of the differences was that my dad didn't steal. And my dad's an honorable guy. And, he at this warehouse, he used to work for this company that did women's clothing, and they manufactured and sold women's clothing. And so that's why I know, that's a sheath dress. That's a whatever. That's an A-line. I know this stuff. I would go to work with my dad on the weekends, like on Saturdays or on Sundays. I'd go into work with my dad, who would take a look at orders that had come in through the warehouse and stuff. And it actually got us into some trouble. I don't want to say I was kidnapped by the mafia, but I went on a ride. I can tell that story.
Tell it, please.
So,
it sounds like the most traumatic thing. So you have some serious trauma.
No, not really. It was fun. My dad, so I guess one of the reasons I hate bullies today, but my dad, so he had a lot of trouble at this warehouse because it was run by the Teamsters, and this was in New Jersey. It was in Philadelphia, Nicky Scarfo and the Teamsters Union. And he was a gangster, and if you're in the Teamsters, are all mobbed up back then, right? So, one of the things my dad would do is it was the first computer system that could, these registers would call home at night and say, hey, we sold this many dresses. And so on Saturdays or Sundays, I would go in with my dad, and he would take a look at all the orders that had come in, and we would get in his little van, and we would drive to different stores and like top off their inventory. And I would be there holding like 2 dresses, like I'm his helper, right? Mm-hmm. Not helping anything. Probably getting in the way.
That's cool of him though, that he was having you do that.
It was fun. It was like special, right? Yeah. And like there were times, like my dad sometimes, like when he was doing work, he'd put me in a box and put me on the conveyor belt. And like I look back on it now, and I'm like, Jesus Christ! Put me in a box on a conveyor belt that's going up and down the warehouse. To me, it was like a roller coaster
kind of thing. Right? Oh my!
Conveyor belt.
Yeah, that's like you'd get away with that back then.
Yeah, maybe we didn't wear bicycle helmets back then either, right? But my dad. The Teamsters found out that he was doing that, and they wanted to have a meeting with him. My dad was like, "Hey, you want to go on a truck?" Yeah, like a big rig, like an 18-wheeler? Like, yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm 6, 7 years old, something like that. Like, yeah, I'll go on a big rig, you know? And, I went to work with my dad, and they put me on a truck.
Oh.
And the guy drove me around for like an hour. Oh. Got a chance to be on a big rig. And I think it was like their way of saying we can reach out and touch you anytime we want.
Oh. Yeah. That was kind of frightening to your dad.
I asked him about it later when I got old enough and I realized what had happened.
Yeah.
I was like, why didn't you fight these guys? He's like, fight? First of all, they'd fire me. They'd just fire me, get another warehouse manager. But the other thing is that like it never gets to the point where the mob kills you or your family. One day everyone will just call out sick. One day all the truckers will call out sick. Or one day a truck will catch on fire. It never gets to the point where they have to kill you. It's
like intimidation tactics.
Yeah, they just make your life suck so much that you're like, you know what? It's just easier to give in. It's easier to give them 10%. I don't know if you ever heard the term "fall off a truck." Oh, fall off a truck. That's a thing in New Jersey. Really?
No.
All right. So where I grew up, in New Jersey, like it fell off a truck. That means like, well, the mob stole.
Oh.
The mob stole it. And a lot of times, like if you're going to operate in a mob-controlled area, they expect a 10%. So 10% of those dresses, I guess back now we have GPS and stuff like that. I think one of the things my dad got were locks that like would alarm when you opened them, so they could only be opened at the store, like only the store person had the key, but that didn't quite work because you might have multiple stores and then it has to be the same lock for every shipment. And then like if it's the wrong lock on the wrong truck, then they can't open it. And now you just wasted a trip and now the inventory is low. Yeah. But, these drivers, they would steal 10% of the merchandise and kick it back up to the Teamsters boss, and they would kick 10% up to their boss and sell the rest. And where'd you get this? Fell off the truck. Don't worry about it. Fell off the truck.
I got you. Yeah, it's so organized crime.
Yeah, and so that was, but my dad didn't steal, and I think growing up, so a lot of my friends, their dads were second story men, so they're doing carpentry work, they're doing roofing, they're doing electrical, they're doing plumbing, but then they're casing the house. So 2 months later, they come back to the house, they steal jewelry, they steal a gun, they steal whatever. And so I remember once I went to my friend's house and my friend was like, "Hey, look what my dad stole." And he's like showed me this phone, like a push button phone.
Oh dear. So, I mean, that, I'm sure that was a sense of pride for you that you realized that, but when did you realize that, that integrity? Like, when did you start to have a concept of being able to be like, yeah, my dad was a man of dignity?
I remember my dad once found a wallet on the street, and we went to the police department with the wallet. I remember that. Yeah.
That's interesting that those are like concrete childhood memories.
Yeah, my dad was a good man. He still is a good man.
Yeah.
I guess it was that level, and my dad never stole. And, I'm surrounded by friends who stole, right? And I don't know, I think a lot of it was my dad. A lot, just him always doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And some of that might be, being a Christian and all that. That might have something to do with it. But there's a lot of bad Christians who do bad stuff. So I don't know if Christianity really has that much to do with it. But Yeah, I think you can be an honorable guy no matter what religion you are.
Yeah.
I think my dad certainly was an honorable guy regardless of the fact that Irish Protestant.
Correct. Yeah. Because it's a personality trait versus a label of, self-righteous label. I agree with you about the labels, and your mom, was she meticulous? Where do you get that sort of the acute attention to detail that you have? Or is that something that were you always like that?
I don't know. That might have been from the Army. Like, because when you're doing Army stuff, like small things matter. You check the small things. Before you go out on patrol, all right, everyone come over here, jump up and down, and you're listening for a piece of equipment that's rattling. Oh, that piece of metal is not taped up. Put a piece of electrical tape on that metal so it doesn't go clink, clink, clink when you're walking. Yeah. Always have a pen, notepad, and a watch. Always whatever. I think a lot of the attention to detail that might come from the military.
Interesting.
I gave myself an extra half hour to get here today. There's no such thing as late. There's no late, right? Like I said, I'd be here at 10:30. I was here at 10:30 and I gave myself an extra, which I needed because $4.95, right? So that probably came from the military of just, you always have to pay attention to detail because that little thing that you forgot to check, I didn't change I didn't check the cherry juice, or I didn't check the trans fluid in the vehicle. And now your vehicle broke down. Now you have to get towed. Now we're down 2 vehicles. Yeah.
You're very diligent. You're a diligent,
I try to be, yeah.
That's cool. And you were definitely on time. That's very cool. Yeah, interesting. And so I kind of want to go back, if it's possible. We talked a little bit about Libya. I feel like a neglected area of the world that we don't really talk much about, but is so important from a resource, strategically from a resource perspective, and all of that is Africa. What do you think is going on in Africa? How is the U.S. footprint in terms of influence in Africa? I'm watching the Chinese open a base in Djibouti, and the Chinese pretty much, helping construct and build African nations now, but also plunder all of the strategic resources that are there and all of that. So it's happening as well in Afghanistan. I mean, I was just talking with someone the other day about like the amount of effort that the United States put into Afghanistan to rebuild. And then now China is just soaking up all of those resources. And oddly, I feel like the Chinese government, the reputation of the Chinese government in many of these countries is one that's much easier to work with because it doesn't come with all of these constraints and, stipulations and sign here and account for this. And I don't know what, they're okay with the corruption. We mentioned about, supply chains and supply security and all of this. It's a neglected area that we're not talking about. What are your thoughts on this?
So I want you to imagine 2 restaurants. All right. Okay. One's an American bistro and one's a Chinese restaurant. Right. And you go to the Chinese restaurant and they say, everything here on the menu, 80% off. And then you go over to the American restaurant, and the American restaurant, they say, everything here is full price. And by the way, you really don't want to eat that Chinese food. That's kind of what's going on in Africa right now, and in South America, where the Chinese roll in and they say, hey, we're going to build infrastructure for you. We're going to give you 5G for 20 cents on the dollar. Yeah. And by the way, just let us peek in on it once in a while. And if you're a ruler of one of these countries, you're like, hold up here. I get rich. My people get a better standard of living with 5G and all these infrastructure improvements. And all I got to do is let the Chinese peek in on our conversations once in a while. Oh, let me go to the U.S. Hey, what do you got? Well, don't do that. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm going with the Chinese, right? And I think that
is that what's happening now?
I think so. The Chinese just have so much of our money, right? Yeah, because we sell the Chinese, the Chinese sells cheap crap. They take our money for that cheap crap, and they can take that money and invest it in Africa. And here's a project for 20 cents on the dollar, but all of your cell towers are now sending data directly back to China.
Yeah.
And they might not need that now, but China's been, so China's been around for 5,000 years.
Yeah.
They've been communist since the 1950s-ish. Well, 1940s, kind of, but 1950s-ish. So they've technically been capitalist for 5,000 years. They have a very long memory, like they have a very long-term view of things, right?
Yeah.
So I think that China knows, like, all right, I don't know what I'm going to do with this cell tower in Botswana, but if we ever need it, it's there.
Their new Silken Road initiative is a global pursuit that I think, from a U.S. standpoint, we're only just starting to catch up to that. But these strategic plans have been in place. I think, Xi Jinping is on his third term now. Yeah. And it is a long game. Are you okay on time?
Yeah.
Okay. I was listening to one of the Chinese Communist Party members talk on an interview about Taiwan and one China policy and their total disregard of the fact that 80% plus of the population does not wish to be a part of China.
In fact, more than 60%, more than half of the population now identifies as not being Chinese, basically.
But it's like, no, it does not matter. Like, Taiwan is Chinese. Like, there's no discussion about this point. What are some of the tripwires that you're possibly watching right now when it comes to the Chinese making their moves on Taiwan? Yeah. What does the world look like? Let me think of how to state this.
Mm-hmm. When are we going to see a conflict in Taiwan?
Yeah, not just that. Like, the whole world is this tinderbox right now.
When I was looking at my watch, it wasn't for time. I wanted to look at my watch for effect and be like, we're either going to see an attack before the elections or we're going to see one in 3 years.
In 3 years? Why 3 years? What are they doing to prepare?
They need to build, they need to do exercises. They need to build the actual amphibious landing ships. They need to build up their drone capacity. Ideally, what Taiwan should be doing right now is they should be creating as many USVs, unmanned surface vehicles, and unmanned aerial vehicles, one-way attack drones. They should be creating as many of those as possible. They should be able to turn the Taiwan Strait into a hellscape. It's not going to stop all of the ships. It's going to stop some. Now, then they have to worry about what happens when the Chinese land. A lot of those beaches, their fields of fire have already been cut out. They know exactly where to fire artillery. And then once you actually get to the island, every single Taiwanese male knows how to use a gun. And some women, too. So if you look at the west corner or the west half of the island, it's like Afghanistan and Vietnam got together and had a baby. It's basically Afghanistan with leaves. And you can hide in that jungle. I don't care what kind of drone you have. You're not finding anybody. Not even with thermals. You can just hide under that foliage and you can just ambush Chinese vehicles day and night. The wind goes to the defender there. But I could see a missile attack against Taiwan right before the election. Or I could see in 2027, I could see some sort of 2027, 2028, I could see some sort of Chinese attack on Taiwan, like an amphibious landing where they're just going to retake the whole island. That's what everyone says.
I think they do an inch at a time. I don't think that the United States is prepared enough to face China right now. Do you?
I do.
Okay.
But it's not us.
Put me at ease.
Okay, so it's not just the United States. One of the things you got to realize is the U.S. is not the hokey pokey. We're not what it's all about. So you have countries like Australia, Great Britain, France, Canada, the Philippines, Japan, South Korea. It's not about the U.S. going it alone. This is why we have allies. And there's a doctrine the United States developed called any censor, any decider, any shooter. Any sensor, any decider, any shooter. And the basic idea is that you could have an Australian Special Forces team spot a Chinese missile launcher. And they say, okay, I want to attack this Chinese missile launcher. So they send that information up to a decider. Could be an AWACS plane, an airborne warning and control plane circling above the Pacific. That AWACS plane finds, because the AWACS plane knows where all of our stuff is, so it finds the most survivable asset that can service that target. So that contacts a Filipino HIMARS launcher and says, okay, launch a missile at this coordinates. The Filipinos don't even know what the heck they're shooting at. They just know, enter this coordinates here. So that's how we defeat China. We have our allies, we have any sensor, any decider, any shooter. Because I'll tell you this, if deterrence fails and China tries to invade Taiwan, everyone's coming to the party. So
right.
It's not a U.S. thing.
Coming to the party.
We have an alliance.
So then we have a World War III scenario using AI. I mean, okay, put me at ease, please.
Okay.
Okay.
So people say,
because China has allies. China has.
Do they?
They do.
Ooh.
Okay, so another thing I'm worried about. You saw this whole Annie Jacobson, nuclear war scenarios. Okay, all right.
That woman. Oh my God,
Ryan, please.
Oh. Did you see the video I put out about that?
I did, and I'm not yet.
She is a great fiction writer.
Okay, I understand that. Well, here's what I feel like. Mm-hmm. Okay, what she's saying is not necessarily wrong. Mm-hmm. Okay. She's just scenario planning. Mm-hmm. I mean, this reminds me of like doing scenario plans, okay. Okay. So she's scenario planning. But the thing is, I understand that there's an amplification to what she's saying because it serves the purpose of frightening the U.S. population and wanting to have nuclear arms control measures in place. Understood. Okay. And so the message is being amplified. But what she's saying is not necessarily wrong. It's just amplified, right? But tell me why it's wrong if you think it's wrong.
It's not very scientific.
Really? Because she spoke with like physicists, and some of these people are in this area that and
so one of the items she talks about nuclear winter, which was a theory.
Oh, I'm frightened by this.
Okay. Was so nuclear winter was a theory that kind of Carl Sagan kind of came up with climate models from the 1980s. Mm-hmm. That when Russia found out about this, they started pushing the nuclear winter theory because they didn't want Pershing missiles in Europe. So nuclear winter is a theory that might happen maybe, but was actually turned into fact by Russian disinformation propagandists pushing this theory among green parties in Europe because it was a way of getting Pershing missiles out of Europe. Pershing missile was like a intermediate range missile that was based in Europe at the time.
Okay, Ryan. So
I can keep going.
Okay. Yes, I want you to keep going, but we're talking thermonuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. Okay. You're like calm when I talk about this. I'm like thermonuclear, and I'm like, okay. But no, so thermonuclear weapons being deployed, but then that smoke plume, wouldn't it not cover the atmosphere? And then we have no sun that's able to penetrate that smoke plume, and vegetation dies and this and that. And you have, a day and a half of food stockpiled at Walmart. And then, imagine the amount of catastrophe and disarray in society. So why, and then if the vegetation dies, then so too does the wildlife and animals. And then, you're left with that scenario of like, okay, there's a few insects that start to emerge and all of that. You heard the narrative that came out of that. So I'd love so much for you to put me at ease, because I definitely got anxious about this.
If there's total commitment, you might have a problem. All right. We're talking about total commitment. Now, there are 2 nuclear bombs are dropped. Total commitment meaning everyone fires all of their weapons.
Okay.
All right. that is not necessarily a realistic scenario. In her book, North Korea fires a nuclear weapon at Washington, D.C., and we decide to respond by firing weapons at North Korea. Russia sees our launch, and Russia decides...
Because that's the launch on command, right?
Yeah, but you don't have to do that. Launch on warning.
Launch on warning, excuse me, yes.
In a more realistic scenario, all right, North Korea just launched a missile. Let it hit Washington, D.C. Let's see what happens. Who cares? We still will have our counterstrike capability. Just taking out Washington, D.C. doesn't mean anything. In the book, they took out Washington, D.C., and they took out a nuclear reactor on California's coast. And, okay, let them. We still have all of our forces that are available to counterattack. And it might not be a nuclear weapon in this case. If it was a North Korean weapon that was fired toward the U.S., might not be a nuclear weapon. Could be a chemical weapon. Could be anything. Could be a dud. Might not work. Let's see what happens. And we might actually be able to shoot it down. I know that one of the things Annie Jacobson goes through in her book is our National Missile Defense System, which is in Alaska and California. There's only 44 launchers. Some of them might not work. There may or may not be a THAAD system, which is a theater anti-air system, covering Washington, D.C. And I say that because I occasionally I do go out on dates, and you meet girls who talk about that sort of thing, especially in D.C. That's a common thing. People who want to talk about how they work for the State Department, right? Oh yeah, we have a THAAD system protecting D.C. It's in West Virginia. All right, maybe, right? But that whole theory of the nuclear winter thing, that comes from total commitment. What is more likely are battlefield nuclear weapons, especially in a case where China invades Taiwan. There's really only 5 use cases for a battlefield or tactical nuclear weapon. It'd be to create a breakthrough, meaning you explode one over a defensive position and you rush troops through that explosion. If you explode one over the air, like in the atmosphere, you're not really getting a lot of radiation. You're not necessarily getting that mushroom cloud. Mushroom cloud happens when you're closer to the ground or on the ground, because all that dirt goes right up into the atmosphere, right? So, and you want to explode things in an air burst for the most part, because if you explode something on the ground, a lot of that energy goes into the ground. You don't want it into the ground. You want it in the air to push out more to destroy troops and such. So create a breakthrough. Stop in advance. So one of our things was during the 1950s, 1960s, when the Soviet horde comes over the horizon, we're dropping nuclear weapons either on the Soviet horde or onto bridges. Ryan, why would you do that? Well, because taking out a bridge with a nuclear weapon is a lot easier than using conventional explosives. Bridges are fairly resilient, and back in the 1950s, 1960s, we really didn't have guided weapons. So just using a nuclear weapon on a bridge would be a lot easier to drop that bridge to stop the Soviet horde. Third reason, underground command bunkers. I could see China use a nuclear weapon on Taiwan's underground command bunker. I forget the darn name of it. Fourth reason, use a nuclear weapon is at a beachhead. So you have the Chinese attacking Taiwan, you use a nuclear weapon right on top of that beachhead, no more invasion. And the fifth reason is to go after aircraft carriers, especially you put a nuclear weapon on a hypersonic missile.
Right.
That would be a great use case for a nuclear weapon, to attack an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily see nuclear weapons being used by China or by the U.S. And I say that mainly because one of the reasons I don't see nuclear weapons being used in Ukraine. Russia, let's put it back. China is absolutely terrified that Russia might use a nuclear weapon in Ukraine, because it would make it easier for us to use a nuclear weapon against China when or if China decides to land in Taiwan. And they're at the disadvantage, right? Because they have the supply lines that have to extend over the sea. And so,
but is that why they have built up their? I mean, they have the largest navy right now, right?
I believe so. Now, their ships aren't necessarily better quality, but sometimes there is a quality to quantity, and they can beat us missile for missile. That's easy. We cannot. There is no way the United States can compete with China's magazine capacity when it comes to missiles. We are working on some of that, like using container ships as loyal wingmen, right? Where you have like a ship, you put a bunch of containers on it, those containers contain missiles, and it's just an automated drone ship that just follows you and launches missiles so you don't have to expend missiles in your magazine. So that's one possibility that we can do. But for the most part, China's at a disadvantage because they have to move people across 100 miles of ocean. Now, we're at a disadvantage too because we have to move people across 6,300 miles of ocean. But we got Australia, we got Japan, we have Korea.
Okay.
We have the UK and France, they have to go far as well. Philippines, the Philippines are a major partner. They are a critical partner.
So I understand that. What influence does China have on the Philippines, though?
The Philippines are backing away from China. I think they realize what side their bread is buttered on. And what's the guy's name? Duarte, is it? I think he kind of realizes that China is not the friend you think it is. China's always going to look out for China. And I think that Duarte just kind of knows, all right, the U.S. is going to give us a better deal. The U.S. is going to give us security. And the Philippines has always had a good relationship with the United States. I mean, we used to... I think one of the reasons you see so many Filipinos in the U.S. Navy is that there was a tradition of Filipinos being allowed to join the U.S. Navy without citizenship.
Aren't they a protectorate?
I don't think anymore.
Oh, okay.
But I know, I want to say up until the 80s or something, there was some treaty between the U.S. and the Philippines that we could take 10,000 Filipino sailors every year. We're not taking them. They volunteered. They wanted to be there. We could accept up to a certain number. And that's why, there's a saying of the Filipino mafia in the Navy.
Really?
Oh yeah. The White House mess, supposedly the White House, the mess in the White House is all Filipinos. And that it just comes from that tradition of the Filipinos serving in the Navy, and a lot of them become cooks.
They are, I hate to generalize, but they are such service-driven nation.
A lot of people on ships from the Philippines, a lot of the crewmen.
I mean, I was amazed as well, the amount of mechanical skill that they have as well. They're very good at trade, the trade craft.
I want to say there were Filipinos in Israel during October 7th who were captured, although they might be from Thailand.
Possibly. There were so many
Could be from both.
Too. Yeah. And so, I guess, what concern do you have about there being a global conflict?
Well, we're already in it.
But a World War III type scenario where everyone is just okay, well, I'm just going to go after my strategic interest.
I think that's a tough one. I don't foresee a nuclear world war. And when people say World War III, they think nuclear war.
I think it's more AI as well, AI driven. Drones, I hear a lot about drones too.
Well, drones are definitely going to be used in the next conflict. I mean, that's one of America's big disadvantages right now is that we're not good at producing good enough systems. And by that I mean, when someone comes out with when the Pentagon decides they want a new tank, they come up with all of these requirements for this tank, and it might take 10 years to develop this tank. Right. Tank's great. It's fantastic. But, it took 10 years to develop. So what if we can get 80% of what we wanted, but have it now? A good example of this was the LCS, Littoral Combat Ship. Littoral Combat Ship, there was this idea of we're going to create this little small, lightly armed ship that was modular. You want an anti-surface package, you plug that in with a shipping container. You want anti-submarine package, you plug that in with a shipping container. And, it's designed to fight in the littorals, in that area of shore in that area of the ocean that's close to the shore. And in trying to get something cheap that did everything, we got something really expensive that didn't do anything well. And it's even stuff like the shipping containers were custom manufactured. They weren't even a regular shipping container, right? We had to make something special. And the plug-in modules never quite worked. But what if we just took a Legend class Coast Guard cutter, painted the thing gray, and does that give us 80% of what we need, right? So one of the issues that we face is that we're not too good at developing or at accepting stuff that isn't 100% of our requirements. And you look at something like Ukraine, I'm sure they would love to use HIMARS rockets instead of hobby drones that they they duct taped a warhead onto, but they don't have that luxury, right? So they're using hobby drones with a warhead bolted to it. So what you have there is an 80% solution, right? It's not perfect, but it's good enough. And we're really bad at good enough solutions.
Right.
And so that's an issue with China, because ideally we should turn the Strait of Taiwan into a hellscape. You dip your toe into that strait, you're going to have every single freaking drone on you. But that's not going to happen if it takes us 10 years to develop a drone.
Right. What I worry about is that we're so focused on these silly domestic politics and this like subversive rhetoric that's starting to come out in the United States. And here we are focused on those types of matters. And yeah, they're important. But meanwhile, policy is so focused on that. Like we just watched RNC, DNC just finished. Like, it's all about like, let's argue out and talk about how we can prepare for better diversity. Yet we're unprepared. We're becoming less and less prepared as a nation for having the supplies in case there's conflict. Yeah. Meanwhile, China has been ramping up to the point where they're exceeding a lot of, the like missile to missile, like you said. So, we're becoming less prepared. Yeah. We are extremely bureaucratic. Yeah. China has the advantage of just issuing whatever order they want. Does this fit into a one China policy or does it not? It's just so like easy, right? Integrated process of just like bam, bam. And so that's really what I'm worried about is from the U.S. standpoint, we're becoming more and more unprepared. Meanwhile, other nations that are vying for that level of superiority globally are becoming more and more prepared. They're also capturing the resources that we need. Yeah. So, that's really what I worry about. Maybe not so much like a nuclear scenario, but more just like, what's the United States going to do when we have no antibiotics to administer? We've had shortages in antibiotics before.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the kind I don't
have the answer to that question.
Like you see things as well, like polio, like popping up in places in the world. It's like, man, preventable things we're not focused on. Making sure that we have the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is a great example. Like instead of it being used in actual wartime and when we need it, it's like, let's use it to balance our cash flow or
lower the price of gas.
Exactly. It's used for political purposes instead of actual preparedness in case of conflict or some type of moment. And I guess I'm not really looking at that. I was just sort of on a rant. I'm not looking for, it's not a question. It's just like a warning.
You should be concerned about it. I think that one of the things that a lot of our adversaries do is they try to divide us. We have more in common than most people want to think, and they use social media to divide us. I can tell you, I have watched zero of the Democratic National. I don't even know I know what's going on, but I don't care. Like that stuff, it's crazy to me when people talk politics because you might as well talk about the weather. You can't affect either one of those things. For the most part, politics is something that happens to you. So arguing over it really doesn't do a darn thing. It really does.
Yet we've never been so politicized and political in history. It feels like
I can remember I worked at one company. It was during President Trump's. Yeah, it was during the last election, 2020, I think. Was it 2020? 2016. 2016. Mm-hmm. I just got out of the military. I was working at this one company. And they used to have the news on in the lobby, like CNN or whatever, and then they switched to the Food Network. Because nobody wanted to hear it anymore. And nobody ever argues over the Food Network, right? That's the wrong way to broil that.
Yeah.
Right. Like, And once they switched to the Food Network, people stopped arguing. And my mother, she watches. It's funny. She watches CNN all day. And I remember. I think I made a video about it because she was arguing. We were at the dinner table. I want to say it was July 4th. It was some holiday. I don't remember. I think maybe it was Labor Day or Memorial Day. And she was. It was right when George Santos was. I think he was going to get kicked out of Congress. And my mother was saying, "Oh, the senator, and he was lying to people." And first of all, he's a congressman, not a senator. But like, all she does is watch CNN all day. But you can't watch CNN all day. You can't pay attention to it all day. So you're doing other things. You're on your phone. Yeah. You're starting dinner. You're doing the laundry. You walk into the room. You catch a little bit. You walk back out. She's probably one of the most. I love you, Mom. I really love you. But you're probably one of the most misinformed people on the planet because all you do is watch CNN all day. And it's not CNN, it's catching snippets of it. Mm-hmm. So you know that there was a senator who was indicted, but you don't remember his name. But then you talk about it like you understand it.
Interesting. And this is the majority of the American street, right? Is like people picking up on like tidbits and like it's like almost correct information.
Well, you're scrolling through, right? Yeah. And then there might be a disinformation artist who puts in some disinformation, and you're like, oh, you only caught a snippet of that reel. Right. And so you go on to the next reel.
But so here's what's interesting, because, CNN, mm-hmm. Fox, all the, typical news programs are all domestic. For the most mm-hmm. part, there is a level, there should be. I'm not saying everything is like not, there is no misinformation. Yeah. But, for the most part, there is an amount of diligence that goes into, producing the content and what's being said. I agree that they have agendas, but they're not necessarily lying. They're not making up things. You won't see AI generated video on CNN, right?
Not intentionally. Accidentally, maybe.
Perhaps. But then yet. Okay. And so that's your mom's generation. Yet our next generation riddled with, TikTok threads of actual disinformation, not misinformation, disinformation that's being pushed out through governments. Mm-hmm. When I look at these farms, like these phone farms, you see those images of just like pushing out content that's just all fake news.
That's why I've advocated striking them. Look. One of the I've given speeches about this for the past year. I was actually just at a conference in Ohio with these military JAGs, these Judge Advocate Generals, where I've talked about how we need to. I've talked about how information war is a weapon, and we need to start taking it as seriously as a weapon. Mm-hmm. If a civilian goes into a munitions factory every day and they're building artillery shells, is that factory a target? Yeah, that's a target. You're building artillery shells for your adversary. If a civilian walks into a misinformation factory where they sit down all day and there's hundreds of phones and they're putting out misinformation that could kill people, is that a target? I say it is.
Okay, well, this is interesting territory, because what about, freedom of speech?
I'll tell you this. When I was in Iraq,
to be killed?
If there was an insurgent that was pointing a rifle at me, I didn't go, whoa, that guy has a Second Amendment right to point a rifle at me, right? Foreigners, they don't have freedom of speech. Well, we can't do that to Americans. But if there is a Russian troll farm that is actively engaged in infodom war mm-hmm. combat mm-hmm. against Americans, they should be treated like combatants.
So it's an actual, it's a legitimate target.
To me, it's a legitimate target. That's up to the lawyers to decide whether to strike it or how to strike it. Could be a cyber attack. Could be something a little more up close and personal. Could be a TLAM. Could be a tomahawk through a window. Could be a lot of those things. But why do they get to hide behind information war and not deal with the kinetic consequences of that? It's no different than an artillery factory. I mean, look, when you take a look at something like China, China, when China invades Taiwan, I have no doubt they're going to use TikTok to say Taiwan has always been Chinese, This is a globalist, imperialist, capitalist attempt at grabbing power of the Taiwanese people. Taiwan is a puppet of the United States and NATO. Go to the nearest naval base and glue yourself to a ship for China. And because you're a tool of the military-industrial complex if you don't do it. And now what do you have? You have a weapon system. You have a weapon system. You can weaponize a weak-minded college student to glue themselves to a Navy ship, to attack a Navy base. How many are you really going to shoot at a bunch of protesters breaking through your naval base? Probably not. And then they glue themselves to the ships, and now those ships can't leave. It's a weapon. Social media is a weapon. TikTok is a weapon. So we should treat those people like combatants, and we should kill them. And I use that language. I use that language very specifically. I freaked one guy out, one interviewer out. He was like, whoa, you want to kill them? Like, they're combatants. If you are working at a disinformation farm, you are a combatant, especially if you're using a disinformation.
But do they know that they're working at that?
Not my freaking problem.
I mean,
that's a you problem.
I'm a little like, oh gosh.
When when you walk into a munitions factory, even if you're sweeping the floor, you're working at a munitions factory. If you're going into work every day and typing out mean tweets that are getting Americans to kill each other, just a couple of weeks ago, there was this one company. I want to say they're based out of Pakistan. There was a guy who walked into a ballet studio in Southampton, England, with a knife, started stabbing a bunch of girls, right? 2 girls died, and then another girl was mortally wounded, died later. A couple of teachers were stabbed, right? And this guy in England, if you're under 17, if you're under 18, you can't. They don't give your name out to the public. Well, this one online news site said the guy's name was an Arab name. He gave an Arab name. They gave an Arab, and if you actually looked at the name, it meant like a window washer. So I don't remember the exact name, but it was a fake name. But all these British people started rioting about Muslims in Europe or in England, and this caused property damage. People got arrested for this, and this was all traced back to this Pakistani-run news site that they just put fake and viral information on there for clicks. Well, one of the dudes who worked for that company was just arrested by Pakistani authorities because it's like a weird Pakistani law, like not blasphemy, but like endangering other Muslims. So Pakistan was like, dude, you just endangered all of these Muslims in England for clicks, essentially, to sell advertising.
Well, anyways, that, I don't know if I would necessarily, I appreciate any thoughts, obviously, but it would be to me unrealistic to expect the United States to have any kind of policy like that, to just take out information warfare.
During time of war? I mean, look, I'm just getting the conversation going.
Yeah, no, I hear you. But I mean, it is definitely a major tool of manipulation that we will need to think about how to address. Whoa.
But, you just got to do it a couple of times and they'll get the message.
I don't think they will. To be honest, I don't think that there is a sanctity for human life in the way, like, how do I say this? Having people working in these information warfare farms, essentially, if they perish while doing that job, there's no severe loss, and I don't think these are going to be even viewed as heroes that are killed.
No, but the question is, would you want to take that job, right? At some point,
people has a choice, though. I mean, honestly, in China, it might be the Uyghurs, for all we know. Honestly.
Yeah. So they use a cyber attack again. I don't do the weaponeering. I just find them. I just tell my boss where they are.
You're getting the conversation going on many topics. Yeah. But yeah. So You are, I want to recognize how remarkable you are at what you do, and the amount of service that you offer to people to be able to grasp truth in a time where truth is becoming more and more scarce. And I just want to acknowledge you for that, because you're incredibly talented and skilled at being able to do that. And your background allows you to really understand the nuances that otherwise people would not even pick up on. And I appreciate you, as I'm sure so many people do, for that capability that you offer to everybody. I highly recommend that people support you through your Substack in particular, because YouTube is one thing, but if you want to get, the full truth, being able to gather that from your Substack is extremely helpful, I think, to the consumer of the information and also to supporting you. How else can we support you?
Well, you can buy a t-shirt from bunkerbranding.com.
By the way, thank you so much for this. I just want to say I love this. I mean, check it out. Check it out. It's really
I
awesome.
thought you were going to go with the Intel Life shirt, but I'm glad you like that one.
I love this one. It's cool, and I like the tab and everything as well. So you have really stood out. You've built this online reputation, and as well, you have your existing reputation from the work that you do. One thing I always ask is, you've stood out, and if you were to do everything all over again, would you want to be a gray man or not be a gray man?
I'm more of a peacock than a gray man. I like being a peacock. Look at my feathers.
Yeah, so definitely not a gray man.
I'm definitely. I can tell you that being on camera is. Some people don't like being on camera. They get. I love getting up, giving speeches.
You're
love
a natural.
I mean, maybe, I don't know. But I certainly do love it. There's definitely a high to it. Like, oh wow, look at all these people. They want to hear what I have to say.
Well, that's because what you have to say is very important, and
I appreciate that.
You're a great conduit for truth, and I appreciate that. As I mentioned before, a lot of parents watch this podcast. Well, not yet, because I'm still at the beginning of my podcast, but the intention is for a lot of parents to watch this podcast. Parents, subscribe, please. You mentioned you are the fun uncle. And so you care about your family, obviously, and your nephews and all of that. So what advice do you have for parents in this coming age, facing a lot of the geopolitical complexities that we're faced with now, but also the new battle space of information warfare, AI? What advice would you give to your nephews and their parents, your brother?
I guess if I would give advice, it would be to encourage your children to read books. I read constantly. When I'm on the treadmill, I'm listening to an audiobook. When I'm on the plane, I usually view that as kind of like me time, and I'm reading like from my Kindle. I have a Kindle. It's easier to carry a Kindle than it is to read all these books or carry all these books. But it would be to give your kids a love of reading, especially like nonfiction, because I think one of the ways you can spot disinformation is by being well-read and being a generalist. 100 years ago, maybe 150 years ago, you had to be a generalist. The average person, they knew how to argue for themselves in court. They knew how to gut a chicken. They knew how to do minor carpentry. They knew how to plant crops, right? The average person knew all those things 150 years ago, maybe, right? So today, everyone's a specialist. You know a heck of a lot about what you do. I know a heck of a lot about computer software. I don't know how to gut a chicken, but that's why I buy chicken from Wegmans, right? I've paid someone else to do that for me. And I think today, one of the big issues is that there's so much knowledge out there that you can very easily fool people who aren't generalists, because it's so tough being a specialist in many different fields that you can easily fool people who don't understand something. Case in point, organ extraction. Do you know how you take an organ for transplant?
I do not.
I didn't know it either.
Tell me.
Until, well, So you need to have an anesthesiologist there who keeps the body alive because you have to keep those organs oxygenated. But when you're Russian, you can put out disinformation saying, look, Ukraine is harvesting organs from dead soldiers. And it sounds right because you have a doctor there and you have some kind of instruments and you have a dead soldier and their body's opened up or something like that. But those organs are no good once you die. I mean, maybe you can take a cornea or something, but like a liver or a heart. So as soon as you die and you're not getting the oxygen in, it's harvesting an organ is a very specialized effort. But most people don't know that because they're not generalists. They don't know those things.
Right.
So it's super easy to fool. Another good example, you've watched baseball, I assume, right? How many bases does a baseball diamond have?
4.
4. And what if I told you it had 5? You're not going to believe me, right? Well, how many wickets does cricket have? Think about that. So I've actually played cricket, 2 wickets, right? There's 2 things that stand up.
We're good.
And, but if I were to say to you it has 4 wickets, well, you never really played cricket. You don't know. So it's really easy to trick people when they don't have that level of general knowledge.
Yeah. It's interesting because I always thought that with more information and the ease of access to information, the more generalist we've become. Like, but you're implying essentially that we're not.
Well, I think a lot of that's because we've gotten so used to looking stuff up.
Yeah.
And so when the video comes along on TikTok or something like that, it might be a little bit harder to pull away and say, oh, let me go fact check this.
Yes.
And what if the
attention span? The attention span is indeed
attention span is a problem. And another funny thing is that you can theoretically seed fake news because if you made a change to Wikipedia 10 years ago and nobody's corrected that, when someone goes and looks up that fact, it might be an incorrect fact. So when you think about it, at least
to that point, also, like even in reputable news sources, like you mentioned, the Wall Street Journal, every now and then it's like, okay, correction made, but the impact of what has been said is already
it's out there.
It's really become a difficult assessment ground in terms of taking what's real and what's not, and likely and not likely. And, I hope that we live in a more safe, secure, and truthful world. And again, thanks for your contributions to that.
Inshallah, right? Inshallah, we'll live in a more safe world.
Well, Ryan, thanks so much. It means so much that you were on the podcast. I hope everyone will go to your channel and get some truth as well out there.
Thank you so much. I had a great time.
All right. What is your word?
Courage.
Courage. Courage, dear heart. C.S. Lewis. There you go, guys. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Very welcome.